After our family reunion, I found my $212,000 savings account empty. My sister just laughed. Relax. We needed it more than you. I calmly, you won't mind the consequences. She kept laughing until, hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My name is Zoe, and a few years ago, at 32 years old, I thought I had it all figured out. You know how people always say money doesn't buy happiness? I've always thought they were missing the point. They forget that it buys something much quieter, much more fundamental, security. And that was what I was after. That was my entire goal. I wasn't dreaming of yachts or first-class trips to Santorini. I wasn't saving up for a designer wardrobe or a flashy sports car. I just wanted a life where one flat tire on the way to work or one unexpected layoff didn't send my entire world into a catastrophic spiral. I just wanted to be able to breathe, to sleep at night without that low-grade hum of anxiety about what would happen if the furnace broke or if I needed sudden dental surgery. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. If you've never been, it's a beautiful place where the pine trees are tall enough to scratch the sky and the air feels older than memory. My house is a small, modest two-bedroom with floors that creak in a familiar rhythm. I know every single spot that groans when you step on it. The one by the fridge is the loudest. The house has character, which is a nice way of saying it's old and has a water heater with a very stubborn personality. It's not much, but it's my sanctuary. I bought it back in 2016, a milestone that felt monumental. I managed it right after I landed my systems analyst job at a medical logistics firm. It's a good, stable job. I'm not inventing the next big app or anything, but I'm the person who makes sure the servers that track shipments of critical hospital supplies across the country are always running. When a hospital in rural Montana is waiting on a shipment of chemotherapy drugs, the system I maintain is the one making sure it gets there. It's quiet, important work, and I'm good at it. It was the first major step in building my fortress of financial safety. My car is a 2008 Toyota Matrix. It got a pretty noticeable dent on the rear bumper from a minor fender bender in a parking lot years ago, and the Arizona sun has started to bleach the roof a lighter shade of blue. I have absolutely no intention of replacing it. It gets me from point A to point B reliably and without fuss. Every dollar I didn't spend on a new car payment was another brick in my wall of security. Most of my morning started in an almost meditative ritual. I'd get up at 6, make a pot of strong black coffee, and pour some oatmeal into a bowl. While it cooled, I'd open my laptop. The first website I visited every single day was my credit union's. It wasn't an obsession. It was my daily reminder that my discipline, my sacrifices were paying off. I loved watching those numbers tick upwards slowly but steadily. It was the one part of my life that felt completely under my control. I watched as $92,300 became $97,200. I remember the day I crossed the 6F figure mark. I celebrated by treating myself to a nice steak dinner alone at my favorite local restaurant. Finally, by the summer of 2024, after a particularly good year at work that came with a decent performance bonus, my savings sat at a beautiful, solid $212,000. That number meant something profound to me. It wasn't just money in a bank. It was proof. It was tangible evidence that I had done things the right way. That every skipped vacation with friends to Mexico, every homemade lunch I packed while my colleagues ordered expensive salads, every single time I said no thanks to takeout or drinks after work or new clothes I didn't truly need, none of it was in vain. My savings account was my promise to myself that I would be ready. Ready for emergencies, for opportunities, for the vast, terrifying unknown. It was my safety net woven thread by thread over years of diligence. I didn't talk about it much, not because I was ashamed or secretive, but because people don't always know how to hold someone else's discipline. They see it through their own lens. They turn it into judgment or jealousy or jokes. My own sister Carol once teased me at a family barbecue. I was explaining why I couldn't join her on a spontaneous weekend trip to Vegas. Zoe, honestly, what are you saving for? The end of the world, she'd said with a loud laugh. And her husband, Rick, had chuckled right along with her, shaking his head as if I were a lost cause. I just smiled and changed the subject, but I wanted to say, no, Carol, I'm saving so that the world doesn't end me. At the time, I didn't realize I wasn't just saving money. I was investing my faith in systems. I was trusting the banks, the passwords, the digital walls I'd built. But more than that, I was naively trusting people. I was trusting the ones I believed would be my biggest supporters, the ones I thought no one close to me would ever dare to touch what I had worked so hard to build. And that I would soon learn was my biggest mistake. Every June, our family makes the obligatory pilgrimage to Lake Powell for a long weekend. It's a tradition my mother enforces with gentle but unyielding pressure. We stay at my parents' old log cabin, a place filled with the ghosts of summers past, the scent of pine cleaner, the stack of dusty board games, the faint smell of wood smoke that never quite leaves. It's always the same predictable scene, the same grilled food, overcooked burgers and hot dogs, the same badly organized three-legged race that my dad insists on, and way too many squeaky folding chairs scattered across the patchy lawn. We all put on our best faces and pretend we're still as close as we were when we were kids, even when the conversations thin out after an hour, and everyone retreats into the blue glow of their phones. It's a comfortable, familiar kind of awkwardness that we've all learned to navigate. The drive varies about 5 hours, and I usually use the time to decompress. I put on a podcast and watch the landscape change from the high pines of Flagstaff to the stark red rock country. That year, I remember feeling a mix of things. I was genuinely looking forward to seeing my parents, but I felt a familiar kind of dread about seeing my sister Carol. Our relationship had become strained. We loved each other, I suppose, but we existed on different planets. I arrived early on Friday afternoon. The heat was already a thick, heavy blanket in the air. I saw my dad on the deck and he waved to me with a can of Coors Light in his hand, a big welcoming smile on his face. Inside, my mom was bustling around the kitchen, pretending not to be annoyed that some of the family was already running late. "Hi, honey," she said, giving me a hug that smelled like flour and onions. "Your aunt is supposed to bring the potato salad, but you know your aunt." I unpacked my small bag in the guest room, the same room I'd stayed in since I was a teenager, and immediately started helping slice a giant watermelon. It was the easiest way to avoid the usual questions about when I was going to finally settle down. My cousin Sarah arrived shortly after, and we fell into an easy surface-level conversation about her kids and my job, while my mom looked unapprovingly. The sun was just starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and pink, when my sister Carol and her husband Rick finally showed up. They rolled in just before sunset in a dusty black sedan I didn't recognize, much newer than their old beater. He honked twice, a little too beat rhythm he always does to announce his presence, and rolled down the window. Carol, in the passenger seat, flashed that same crooked, mischievous grin she's had since she was 17. "Zoe," she shouted, drawing out my name like a game show host. "Still off the grid and making spreadsheets for a living." I walked to meet them halfway down the gravel path, a slice of watermelon in my hand as a peace offering. Still making jokes that no one thinks are funny. I shot back and she just laughed. A loud theatrical sound. Rick stepped out of the driver's side. He was wearing a breezy sundress that looked expensive and sunglasses that were way too big for her face. "Zoe," she sang, pulling me into one of those hugs that's all surface and no anchor. It was the kind of hug where you can feel the person is already thinking about letting go. "You look the same," she said, pulling back to look me up and down. Still so disciplined. The way she said the word made it sound like an affliction. It had been over a year since I'd seen them in person. Rick smelled like aftershave and Red Bull, his usual combination. Carol smelled like some expensive citrus perfume and sunscreen. They looked good. There were tired lines around their eyes if you looked closely, but they had a polished, glossy veneer that I hadn't expected. It seemed forced. That night at the big family dinner on the deck, the old dynamic kicked right back in. Carol held court, telling loud stories and making jokes at everyone's expense, especially mine. She talked about my mountain monk lifestyle, asking if I'd taken a vow of silence or just a vow against online dating. I laughed it off, used to her barbs, but I noticed something strange. Rick's eyes kept darting to me. He wasn't just glancing, he was watching me. He watched my hands, my simple Timex watch, the way I passed the serving bowl. It was less like friendly interest and more like an assessment, a calculation. I tried to ignore the unsettled feeling it gave me. Later, as the rest of the family was outside making Esmores and telling the same old stories from high school for the 100th time, I caught Rick staring at me again from across the flickering firelight. He smiled when I noticed a slow, deliberate smile. "You're always so put together, Zoe," he said, his voice a little too smooth over the crackle of the fire. "I don't know how you do it." "It's not that hard," I shrugged, feeling defensive for some reason. "I just plan ahead." He nodded slow and thoughtful, as if I just revealed some profound secret of the universe. "Plan ahead," he repeated softly to himself. It was a bizarre conversation, and it left me with a small, cold feeling in the pit of my stomach I couldn't quite name. I decided to go to bed early. The next morning, I came into the kitchen for coffee around 7, and Rick was already there, leaning against the counter and staring out the window at the lake. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. He turned as I came in, a practiced, easy smile on his face. "Morning, Zoe. You're up early," he said. "Always am," I replied, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. "Can't break the habit." We made small talk for a few minutes about the weather and my parents, but the whole time I felt that same sense of being studied. He asked about my job, not just what I did, but about the company's financial health, about my salary, about my 401k. The questions were a little too specific, a little too prying for a casual morning conversation. I gave vague answers, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Later that afternoon, the cabin fell into a sleepy, sun-drenched quiet. My parents were napping, and my cousins had taken the boat out on the water. It was just me, Carol, and Rick left. I was reading a book on the deck, trying to ignore the low murmur of their arguing coming from inside, when Rick came out alone. He looked stressed. "Hey," he said softly. "Carol's taking a nap. I was going to walk the lake trail for a bit to clear my head. Want to come with?" I was surprised. Rick and I never did things together, just the two of us. But he looked so genuinely troubled that I felt a pang of sympathy. "Sure," I said, putting my book down. "I could use a walk." We walked in silence for a while, the only sound being the crunch of gravel beneath our shoes. The heat was dry, but the breeze off the water made it bearable. I could hear the distant buzz of a jet ski and the low murmur of voices from a party across the cove. It was peaceful, but the silence between us felt heavy with unspoken things. "I'm sorry if Carol teased too much last night," Rick said suddenly, not looking at me. "She thinks she's being funny. She always has." "It's fine," I replied, keeping my tone light. "I'm used to it. We're sisters." He kicked a pebble off the path with the toe of his sneaker. "You've really built something solid for yourself, haven't you, Zoe? A good job, a house, you're stable." "I guess," I said, wary of where this was going. "It's taken a lot of time and work." He stopped walking then and turned to face me. His whole demeanor shifted. The easygoing mask dropped completely, and his expression became serious pained. "Zoe," he said, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. "Hi, I need to tell you something. And please, you have to promise you won't tell Carol I told you. She'd absolutely kill me." A knot of dread started forming in my stomach before I even knew why. "Okay," I said slowly. He took a deep breath. "Carol's pregnant," he said, and his eyes were already starting to water. "We found out last week." I blinked, processing. "Wow, Rick, that's big news. Congratulations." He gave a tiny, bitter half laugh, a sound completely devoid of joy. "It's not good news, Zoe. We're broke." like completely, hopelessly broke. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely desperate. Carol's car got repossessed last month. We're 3 months behind on rent and the landlord is threatening eviction. We've been living off credit cards for 6 months and they're all maxed out. And now this. The knot in my stomach tightened until it hurt. His voice cracked as he continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. I don't know how we're going to make it. She's working double shifts at that horrible diner, coming home exhausted and smelling like grease. And I'm between jobs again. This whole freelance marketing consultant thing is a bust. I haven't landed a real client in months. I'm scared, Zoe. I'm really, truly scared. How can we bring a baby into this mess? Before I even had a chance to think, the words just came out of my mouth. It was an instinct, a sisterly reflex. I can help, I said softly. Rick, it's okay. I can help. I can send you something to get you caught up. No, he said quickly, shaking his head a little too emphatically. No, Zoe. I wasn't telling you this to get anything from you. I would never ask. We'll figure it out. But he was asking. We both knew it. His eyes were pleading. Seriously, Rick, I insisted, my heart aching for them, for my unborn niece or nephew. Whatever you need, I mean it. Your family. He finally looked at me and he nodded, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. Thanks, Zoe. It means a lot to know someone cares. We walked the rest of the way in an almost complete, heavy silence. When we got back to the cabin, Carol was awake, playing cornhole with our cousins as if nothing in the world was wrong. She laughed loudly when her beanbag landed on the board, completely oblivious to the life-altering conversation that had just taken place. I went to my room and sat on my bed, my head spinning. All I could think about was my sister, pregnant and struggling. The image erased any doubts I might have had. That night, I went to bed thinking about numbers again. But this time, I wasn't admiring my savings. I was calculating how much I could give away without derailing my own future. The next morning, the last day of our long weekend, I came into the kitchen earlier than usual. The house was still quiet, bathed in the soft gray light of dawn. No coffee was brewing yet, no laughter from the porch. The only person there was Carol, and she was hunched over my laptop at the kitchen table. She looked up, startled, as I walked in. Her entire body jumped. Her fingers were frozen mid-trackpad. Oh, she said, her voice a little too high, a little too bright. Zoe, you scared me. I was just, checking the weather. My phone died overnight. I stopped in the doorway, my heart giving a strange, uncomfortable lurch. Oh, okay, I said, forcing a casual tone. No problem. She scrambled to step back from the table, giving me a wide berth as if the laptop were radioactive. I walked over and deliberately closed the lid without looking at the screen. I didn't want to see what she was really looking at. I didn't want to confirm the suspicion that was now screaming in my head. Storm's supposed to roll in around 4 o'clock, she added, her voice still chirpy. Just wanted to see if we should leave early. She was talking too fast, as if the extra words could prove her story. Then she smiled, a wide, bright, fake smile that didn't reach her eyes, and slipped out of the room. I stood there for a long, silent second. My coffee mug was still in the cabinet. My laptop had been open, something I rarely do when I'm not actively using it. I didn't remember leaving it like that. And I certainly didn't remember leaving myself logged into my email or any other accounts. A flicker of real doubt, cold and sharp as a needle, pricked at my carefully constructed sense of calm. I tried to brush it away. It was probably nothing. I was being paranoid. She was pregnant and stressed. I was reading too much into it. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. Later that morning, while everyone was packing up their cars and saying their goodbyes, I slipped back into my room, sat on the bed, and quietly changed my banking password. It felt ridiculous even as I was doing it. This was Carol, my sister, the girl I grew up with, the one I shared a room with for 16 years. but my precaution was only half-hearted. A little voice in my head, the one that wanted to believe in family, stopped me from going further. I didn't reset the security questions she would know the answers to, like our mother's maiden name or the street we grew up on. I didn't enable two-factor authentication, something my bank had been practically begging me to do for months. I didn't even log out of all my active sessions. It felt like an accusation. It felt ugly and cynical because suspicion felt like betrayal, and I wasn't ready to betray my own sister, especially not when she was pregnant and in trouble. Instead, I focused on the number I'd gone to bed with. $5,000. $5,000 wouldn't break me. It wouldn't even make a noticeable dent in my savings. I'd still have over $200,000 left. And if it meant my sister and her unborn child could have a safe place to live, if it meant they could stop drowning in debt and breathe easier, wasn't that worth it? Wasn't that the whole point of having a fortress? To be able to open the gates and offer shelter to the people you loved? I didn't bring it up with them before they left. I wanted to think about how to frame the offer. I wanted to make it sound like a gift, a gesture with no strings attached, something that wouldn't damage her pride. That afternoon, as we all sat by the dock for one last hour of forced family time, I caught Carol looking at me again. It was a quick, unreadable glance. This time, I looked away first. They left before lunch on Sunday. Carol hugged me harder and longer than usual. "You're the best, Zoe," she whispered in my ear. "You really are." The words felt heavy, significant. I thought it was gratitude, and then they were gone, leaving a cloud of dust on the gravel road. I drove home that afternoon, my heart full of a strange mix of pity and purpose, already planning the logistics of the bank transfer in my head. Monday morning started like every other Monday of my adult life. I got up at 6 o'clock, fed my neighbor's cat, a fluffy orange tabby named Marmalade, who has basically adopted me, and then I put on a pot of coffee. It was cloudy outside, the kind of quiet gray morning that makes everything feel slower, more deliberate. It was peaceful. I felt good about my decision to help my sister. I sat down at my kitchen table with my steaming mud and opened my laptop. My mind was still half on a work project and half on whether $5,000 was too much or not enough for Carol and Rick. I navigated to my credit union's website, a familiar routine. I typed in my username and my newly changed password, feeling a small, silly sense of reassurance. I logged in. I expected to see the same familiar number that had greeted me for months. Those 6 hard-won digits, need and earned, the bedrock of my quiet life, but what I saw on the screen stopped my breath. I blinked. My brain simply couldn't process it. I refreshed the page, watching the little circle spin, certain it was a display error. It loaded again. It was the same. My savings account balance read $0. I stared for a few more seconds, maybe a full minute, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were showing me. This had to be a glitch, a major system error. Maybe the entire site was down for maintenance. Maybe I had accidentally logged into an old closed account from college. I checked again, my fingers starting to tremble. I logged out and logged back in, typing my credentials with painstaking care. The page reloaded. Same result, a perfect, soul-crushing, impossible 0. I didn't even realize I was standing up until I felt the hot coffee slush against the side of the mug and burn my hand. The pain barely registered. My own fingers felt foreign and clumsy as I fumbled with my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. I found the customer service number on the website and dialed with fingers that didn't feel like they belonged to me. "Thank you for calling Western Oak Credit Union." A cheerful, automated voice chirped, a sound that felt like a cruel joke. After what felt like an eternity of navigating automated menus, press 1 for account balances. Press 24. A real person finally came on the line. "How can I help you today?" a young woman's voice asked. "This is Zoe Hale," I said, trying my best to keep my voice from shaking, from cracking. "I'm logged into my account online, and there's something very wrong." My savings account is showing as zero balance. That's not possible. It's a mistake. There was a pause on the other end, then a softer, more serious tone. Okay, ma'am. I understand your concern. Let me pull up your file. Can you please verify your full name and the last 4 digits of your social security number? I did, reciting the information numbly. Another pause. The sound of typing, click, clack, click, filled the silence. It felt like an eternity. Okay, Miss Hale, the woman said, and her voice was careful now, professional, but tinged with something that sounded like pity. I'm seeing a series of large outgoing transfers from your account. They started late on Friday night and continued through Sunday morning. My throat went completely dry. Transfers? I whispered, my voice. I didn't make any transfers. There were multiple transfers, ma'am. She continued, her voice gentle. All totaling $212,000. The number spoken aloud by a stranger hit me like a physical blow. The room started to spin, the edges of my vision going dark. I gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. Where? I managed to choke out. Where did it go? It went to several external accounts. Ma'am, I strongly advise you to file a fraud report with us immediately. I can email you the full transaction list right now. You'll also need to file a police report. The email landed in my inbox with a soft ping before we even ended the call. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. I clicked it open, my eyes scanning the attachment, the cold, hard data of my life's undoing. Line after line of digital theft. $18,500. $12,000. $22,000. Each withdrawal was a brick being violently pulled from the foundation of my life, leaving me more unstable, more exposed. And then I saw them. The names on the receiving accounts listed in stark black and white. Delaney R. Hale, Ellis J. Hale, my sister, my brother-in-law, the ones who had smiled across my parents' dinner table and thanked me for the lemonade, the ones who had hugged me goodbye just yesterday morning. Her words are the best, echoing in my ears like a curse. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had stolen my past, my future, my belief in the one thing I thought I could always, always count on, family. I sat there still for a very long time. The coffee in my mug went cold. The gray morning light outside turned into the flat light of midday. Then a switch flipped inside me. The shock and the grief burned away, leaving behind something cold and hard and clear. I stood up, walked to my bedroom, packed a small overnight bag with a change of clothes and a toothbrush, and drove to Phoenix without telling a single soul where I was going. The drive to Phoenix was a 5-hour blur of asphalt and fury. I don't remember the music I played or the cars I passed. My mind was a static-filled void one minute and a courtroom the next, where I was both prosecutor and judge. I replayed the last 72 hours on an endless loop, searching for the signs I'd so willingly ignored. Each friendly smile from Carol, each concerned word from Rick now looked grotesque, like a poorly designed mask they were wearing. The fake pregnancy, the soba story, the crocodile tears. It was all a script, a well-rehearsed performance designed to gut me. I stopped once for gas somewhere outside of Camp Verde. As the tank filled, I caught my reflection in the grimy gas station window. The person staring back looked hollowed out, her eyes burning with a cold fire I'd never seen before. That was the moment the last of the grief turned into something else. Resolve hard as steel. By the time I saw the sprawling skyline of Phoenix, I wasn't a victim anymore. I was on a mission. I got there just after noon. Their apartment complex looked exactly as I remembered it from my one and only visit months ago. But now it seemed different, stripped of any pretense of being a home. It looked like what it was, a transient, temporary place built fast and cheap. Sun-bleached siding, a sagging second-floor balcony held up by rusting poles and a row of dented, uneven mailboxes out front. I parked my car in a visitor spot and walked up the outdoor stairs to their apartment number 2B. My heart wasn't pounding with anxiety anymore. A strange glacial calm had settled over me. I wasn't here to scream or cry. I was here for confirmation, for a final look at the faces of the people who had done this to me. I knocked once, a solid, firm knock that echoed in the quiet breezeway. Then again, Rick opened the door. He was wearing basketball shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt that said Taco Tuesday on it. He was barefoot and holding a half-empty bottle of orange soda. His face broke into a lopsided, confused smile when he saw me. "Zoe," he said, and the genuine surprise in his voice was almost comical. "Didn't expect to see you today. Everything okay?" I didn't answer him. I just stared at him for a second, then walked past him into their apartment. It was messy with clothes thrown over a chair and a stack of pizza boxes on the small dining table. Carol was on the couch scrolling through her phone, looking completely relaxed. She glanced up, blinked once, a flicker of something. Annoyance, surprise in her eyes, and then she slowly set the phone down. She was wearing one of Rick's oversized faded sweatshirts. The air in the room tightened instantly, thick with unspoken knowledge. Rick shut the door behind us. Nobody asked me why I was there. They were still pretending. "My account," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence in the small, stuffy room like a shard of glass. All of it. It's gone. Carol gave a single soft laugh. It was an airy, dismissive sound, like I'd just told a mildly surprising story about running into an old friend at the grocery store. "You're being dramatic," she said, not even looking at me, focusing on a loose thread on the couch cushion. "You used your own names," I said, my voice still quiet, still steady. "You didn't even bother to hide it. The bank sent me the transaction records." She finally looked up at me, and there was no remorse in her eyes, only a cold, defiant arrogance. She shrugged, brushing some imaginary lint from her knee. "Relax," she said, and the casual cruelty in that one word struck me harder than a slap in the face. "We needed it more than you. You're always fine, Zoe. You're the responsible one. You'll bounce back." Rick, emboldened by her defiance, leaned against the wall, crossing his arms over his chest. He had that smug, condescending look on his face again. "She's right. You save money like a doomsday prepper. You weren't doing anything with it. It was just sitting there collecting digital dust. We put it to good use. They weren't sorry. They weren't even trying to lie anymore. They were proud. They thought they had gotten away with it. They had judged me, my life, my choices, and decided they were entitled to the fruits of my labor. They thought I would just accept it, that I would be the quiet, disciplined Zoe who would absorb the blow, go home, and start saving all over again because that's what I do. In that moment, standing in their cheap apartment that was probably paid for with my money, surrounded by the life they had just bought with my future, all the hurt, all the shock, it all crystallized into something new. It wasn't anger, it was precision. I pulled out my phone. My thumb was perfectly steady as I unlocked it. My voice, when I spoke, didn't rise. Carol sat up a little straighter on the couch, a frown finally appearing on her face. "What are you doing?" she asked, a hint of genuine irritation in her voice. I was already dialing. 3 numbers. That's all it took to end their smug little victory party. 911, what's your emergency? A calm, professional voice on the other end asked. And I answered, my eyes locked on my sister's, whose arrogant smirk had finally begun to fade, replaced by a dawning look of horror. "I need to report a theft," I said, my voice clear and even. "A large-scale financial theft, and I'm standing in the apartment of the people who took it." Rick's face dropped. His jaw went slack. Carol didn't laugh this time. She just stared, her mouth slightly open, as the reality of what I was doing, what I had already done, began to sink in. "Yes," I said to the operator when she asked for the address, and I recited it from memory without a single hesitation. "Yes," I said again when she asked if I was safe. "I'll wait outside." I hung up the phone and walked out of the apartment without another word, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't slam it. This wasn't a moment for theatrics. This was a moment of consequences. I went down the stairs, my steps feeling light for the first time all day, and stood on the sidewalk, leaning against the familiar dent of my old Toyota, the warm Arizona sun on my face. A few minutes later, I saw a curtain twitch in their second-floor window. The pretending was officially over. If you are still listening to my story, please help me by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 below. It lets me know that you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me to keep going. Please just comment with the number 1 and then listen as I tell you the rest of my story. The police arrived faster than I expected. 2 patrol cars, their lights off, rolled quietly into the complex. I pointed up to the apartment and 2 officers went up while 2 stayed and took my preliminary statement. I was calm, factual, and handed them the printed email from my bank with the transaction details. They were arrested 3 days later after the police had secured a warrant. I wasn't there to see it, of course. I was already back in Flagstaff on the phone with fraud departments, lawyers, and detectives. The days between the 911 call and their arrest were a blur of sterile police stations and long detailed statements. I had to walk them through my life, my savings habits, my relationship with my sister. It was humiliating, like having my soul audited. But I heard about the arrest from a neighbor in their complex who had my number from my one previous visit. She said Rick opened the door shirtless, a smug smirk on his face, which apparently melted the second he saw the badges and the warrant. Carol, the neighbor said, just started screaming and crying. Of course, someone recorded it from across the parking lot, and the shaky cell phone video ended up on the neighborhood Facebook group under the title Drama at the Sagebrush Apartments. I never watched it. I didn't need to. The police report was cold and factual. The charges listed in neat black ink: identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. There was no room for sentiment in that document. No mention of shared childhoods or trips to the lake or holiday photos. It was just a clean, brutal summary of their crime. A few nights after the arrest, my phone rang. The screen lit up with a picture of my mother. I stared at it for a full minute, my heart a heavy, cold stone in my chest before finally answering. "Zoe," she sobbed before I could even say, "Hello?" "What have you done?" I said. "Nothing. I just stood in my quiet kitchen and listened to her cry. He's your brother-in-law. She's your sister. She's pregnant," she repeated, her voice hysterical. "How could you do this? How could you call the police on your own family over money?" The accusation that this was just over money made my blood run cold. "She's not pregnant," I said, and my voice was flat, devoid of any of the emotion that was raging inside me. There was a sudden silence on the other end. "What did you say?" she whispered. She lied. "Mom," I said. My voice is clear and hard as a diamond. "There is no baby. The lead investigator on the case told me this afternoon. She admitted it under questioning. It was all a lie to get me to lower my guard." More silence. I could hear my father's muffled voice in the background asking what was going on. Then I heard a sharp curse. I don't think I'd ever heard my father say anything like that before in my entire life. I have to go," my mother whispered, and the line went dead. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the phone still in my hand. The dishwasher beeped, signaling it had finished its cycle. A breeze came through the open window and moved the corner of a grocery receipt on the counter. Everything around me was normal, steady, the kind of ordinary I had worked so hard to protect. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right decision. My relationship with my parents was fractured, maybe forever, but I had chosen to protect myself. The next morning, I emailed the lead detective on the case to confirm that I would be pressing all possible charges and would participate fully in the prosecution. She responded quickly. Grateful, she wrote. Then she told me what would happen next. There'd be a trial. Maybe I'd get some of the money back through restitution. Maybe not. But the process had begun, and I wasn't stepping back. Not 1 inch. The trial didn't take long. When the theft is digital, the evidence is clean and unforgiving. The transfers were traced directly back to them, right down to the IP address pinging from the Wi-Fi router in their cheap apartment in Phoenix. My bank's fraud team was incredible, providing a mountain of digital paperwork. And to ensure everything was airtight, my lawyer advised me to hire a private digital forensic analyst, a man named Keith. He testified with a calm, unshakable clarity that made their defense look like bad community theater. Their lawyer, a tired L-looking public defender, tried to argue that it was all a big misunderstanding, a family loan that was poorly communicated. But Keith calmly presented the evidence, the password reset requests that originated from their IP address, the security questions being answered correctly, and the methodical way the money was drained in chunks small enough to avoid immediate automatic fraud alerts. It was a planned-out, deliberate heist. My parents didn't come. Neither did any of my aunts, uncles, or cousins. They all wanted to stay out of it, which was a cowardly way of saying they didn't want to choose a side. So I sat in that cold courtroom alone day after day. Across the room, Carol sat there like it was all a great inconvenience to him, his jaw clenched, his hands folded as if he were a man enduring a boring but mandatory meeting. Rick, on the other hand, cried through most of it. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her shoulders shaking like someone auditioning for the role of a tragic victim. But her tears had no effect on me anymore. I knew they were just as fake as her pregnancy. Neither of them ever looked at me. Not once. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Judge Carola, who didn't miss a thing, called their actions deliberate, predatory, and shockingly cruel. I'll never forget her words. She said it was a betrayal layered in both emotional and financial cruelty, targeting a family member whose only fault was trusting them. I didn't flinch when she said it. I just felt seen, validated. Rick eventually took a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence. He got 6 years in federal prison with no chance of parole for at least 5. The judge was harder on him, citing his manipulation and the fact that he was the one who concocted the despicable pregnancy lie. Carol got 2 years in a low-security facility and 5 years of probation. She made a short, rambling statement at the sentencing, something about desperation and how sorry she was for the confusion and hurt feelings. But she never once used my name, and she never looked at me. There was no real apology. There was no accountability. Through the court's asset seizure, I recovered a total of $71,000. It turned out the very first thing Rick had done with my money was buy a brand new Nissan sedan leased under Carol's name, but paid for in full with a single transfer. They seized the car. They also seized some jewelry, a new laptop, and a high-end television. The rest of it, over $140,000, was just gone, vaporized. Groceries, rent, maxed-out credit card payments, online gambling sites under Rick's name, maybe beer, and fancy dinners. My quiet, disciplined life had paid for their loud, reckless one for a few short months. After the final sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse alone. No one was waiting for me. There were no messages of support on my phone, no apology calls from the extended family who had decided to stay out of it. There was no screaming match, no cathartic confrontation with my parents. There was just the sound of my shoes on the concrete courthouse steps in the cold bite of the January air. When I got home to Flagstaff that evening, I made a cup of tea and sat by my living room window, watching the snow fall under the streetlights. The world outside was quiet and white and clean. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I just felt tired, deeply, profoundly tired. But I wasn't broken. The foundation had been rocked, but it had not crumbled. That night, I began to rebuild. I changed every single password I owned, making them long, nonsensical strings of characters. I closed every account at my old credit union, the place where I'd had my first savings account as a child, and opened new ones at a completely different national bank. I spoke to my lawyer, a kind but no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright, about sealing certain files and putting protections in place I never even knew existed. She charged a high fee, but the peace of mind was worth every penny. I bought a new heavy-duty deadbolt for my front door, not because I feared a physical break-in, but because I was learning how to be someone who guards things better. The rest of my family stayed silent, and I started again. It's been 8 months since the sentencing. My life is quieter now in ways that feel earned and intentional. I still live in the same house with the creaky floors. I still drive the same 2008 Toyota with the dent in the bumper. I still drink the same strong coffee every morning. On the surface, nothing has changed. But underneath, everything is different. I've rewritten the rules of my own life, and I started with myself. The first thing I rebuilt was control. I now have a new bank and a new credit union. I have 2-factor authentication on every single account from my email to my pizza delivery app. My security questions are no longer things someone who knew me as a child could guess, like my mother's maiden name. They are bizarre, random strings of words that only I would know. I spent a weekend learning how to encrypt sensitive folders on my computer, how to monitor login attempts on my accounts, how to close all the digital doors I had carelessly left open for years. I started saving again slowly, patiently. It's nowhere near 6 figures yet. It's not even close, but every dollar means more now. Every dollar that goes into that new, heavily protected account feels different. It's not just money, it's proof. It's proof I survived something that was meant to leave me gutted and helpless. It's a testament to my own resilience. I don't talk to Carol or Rick. He sent a letter from prison a few months ago, but I threw it in the fireplace without opening it. I don't answer the calls from unknown numbers that started showing up on my phone last month. I don't check the neighborhood Facebook page where someone mentioned that Carol, now out on probation, had posted a Bible quote about forgiveness. That's her business, not mine. My forgiveness is not a commodity, and it is certainly not available for withdrawal. Instead of staring at my bank account, I started looking up at the world around me. I started hiking more, taking longer, more challenging walks on the trails that snake through the Cunino National Forest behind my house. I bought a used DSLR camera and started teaching myself photography. I started capturing small, beautiful things. The way sunlight filters through the pine needles, the intricate pattern of ice on a puddle, the intense gaze of a raven perched on a branch, things that are beautiful and priceless and cost nothing. It was terrifying at first, but I even joined a trivia group at a local brewery. The first time I almost turned around and went home, but I forced myself to walk in, found an empty seat at a table with a few other people, and quietly joined their team. Now, every Tuesday night, they only know me as Zoe, the woman who knows a surprising number of weird geography facts and is decent at 80s movie trivia. They don't know my story, they just know me. And that feels like a gift, and I'm dating again. His name is Mark. He's a geology professor at the local university. I met him on a hike. He's kind and a little awkward, and he has a quiet strength about him. He knows when to just be silent and sit with you. He doesn't push for details or try to fill every silence with noise. He knows when to leave things alone. I haven't told him everything yet. He knows I had a major falling out with my family over finances. He knows it was bad, but he hasn't pressed for more. I think he knows I'll tell him when I'm ready. I probably will eventually, but for now, we laugh. We go on long hikes and he tells me about rock formations. We sit in a comfortable silence that doesn't ache. And when he asks about my past, I just tell him the simple, honest truth. I used to save too much and trust too easily. The rest can come later. No one touches my accounts but me now. No one else holds the keys. Not to my passwords, my finances, or my future. What they took from me changed everything. It burned my old naive life to the ground. But what I built after from the ashes, it's smaller. Maybe it's more heavily guarded. It's wiser, but it's mine. And it is absolutely unbreakable.